What's up, everyone? Welcome back to HT with Dave. This month, I'm really excited. One, I just got back from Hawaii and had an amazing time with the family. I'm still a little sunburned, but that's better than being super pale, especially for shooting a YouTube video. But the other thing too is it's been now 5 months since my hair transplant with Dr. Cinik. If you've been following me on my channel, you'll know in October, I had a 3200 graft DHI FUE procedure. So stay tuned. At the end of this video, I'll be showing you up close and personal some of the progress that I've got going on. So that's exciting, but I'm also really glad that I can share with you my research now on scalp micropigmentation, or SMP. If you're watching this video, you've probably already at least heard of scalp micropigmentation, but I'll be the first to admit there's not an abundance of information out there on SMP. It's a fairly new procedure. So I'm happy to share with you today on this week's HTFAQ all the details on the procedure itself, how it differs from an actual regular tattoo, the cost, the expectations, the longevity of it, all those things. So without further delay, let's jump right in. Okay, so what is scalp micropigmentation? Yes, it is basically a tattoo. It is a semi-permanent ink that's placed directly to the scalp. But before you run down to your local tattoo shop, just know that an S.M.P. procedure is a bit more involved than that. And that's what we're gonna talk about right now. All right, so for a lot of guys, I think they look at S.M.P. as an alternative to getting a hair transplant or an alternative to having a hair piece system. And although that is true, some people may not be aware that an S.M.P. procedure can also be used to conceal smaller specific areas, thin spots, or even scars. So it has become quite popular now with patients who are concealing their FUT scars. So someone who got a strip method surgery can then, after a year, they recommend waiting a year for that scar tissue to fully heal. You could go in then and have an S.M.P. procedure just on the scar line. And it's actually the reason why I'm looking into this. So back in 2017, I had my surgery, and back then, only 4 years ago, S.M.P. wasn't really talked about all that much. The option that I was considering was just getting new hairs put on the scar from a small FUE procedure. But when you look at the affordability and kind of the recovery, it's much easier to get an S.M.P. procedure than to go through another FUE surgery, even if it was just a small touch-up surgery. So I just wanted to touch base on that it's not just an all or nothing, S.M.P. hair transplant, hair piece. You can actually kind of let the S.M.P. procedure enhance what you already have. So first, we're going to talk about the placement of the actual ink. Now, in a regular tattoo, they go much lower. Many of you know there are several layers of the skin. They're down here. And the reason behind that is longevity. The ink can last longer the deeper you go. However, the deeper you go, the higher the risk you have of that ink fading or blurring. They call that migration. And that's not something you would ever want on top of your scalp. It would be quite unnatural looking and very obvious. So because of that, they're aiming more towards the top of the skin layer. However, the very top layer is constantly exfoliating and it's exposed to UV light. So typically, that would be a bad area to put any ink that you want to last longer than, say 6 months or so. So that top layer is avoided and they'll just go just below that layer. And this is why it's so important that you find a clinic that specializes in SMP, that they know exactly that sweet spot to hit and they have the equipment to do so. Now, another interesting thing about the placement is scar tissue. And that came up in one of the conversations that I had with my quote. Since I am actually interested in SMP to cover an FUT scar, they had mentioned that likely there'd be a high chance that I would need several touch-ups. And the reason why is that scar tissue heals a little different for everyone. And it can be uneven, it can be thicker in some areas, or it might just be like regular skin, depending on how well you recovered, how well the surgeon stitched that line. So a good clinic will be upfront with you and explain those things. The upfront cost may be higher, but it may include 6 months or a year of touch-ups because they know that's probably something that will be in your future. Otherwise, you may go to a cheaper clinic that will give you a very inexpensive first procedure, but then you may find out soon that you're unhappy with that, or you can see that there's obvious longevity issues there, and then now you're paying for each time to go back. So something to keep in mind, especially if you're looking at covering an FUT scar. Next, we'll talk about the equipment. Now, the needles that they use are tiny, tiny little needles. They are micro needles, but the right equipment in the wrong hands won't give you a quality SMP, right? So you have to have an artist, and that's really what they are, right? You have to have an artist that knows how to use the equipment correctly. And some of that just comes down to the pressure, their hand pressure, the angle, the randomness that could really replicate what the follicle pattern really looks like, to be able to fade in those areas like the temples or the corners, as they call it, to make that look natural. A recommendation or a suggestion that I have: find a photo or several of them of what you want it to look like, and make sure that is the game plan. Make sure you go to a clinic that has proof that they can really back up their word and really can create that natural look. All right, this next one is color matching, or the color pigment. And I'm gonna admit, this one really blew my mind. The information that I'm about to share with you came from Matt Iulo over at Scalp Micro USA. And by the way, if you guys are looking for any more information after this, go check his channel out. They are, I think, probably one of the best clinics for SMP. And it's a shame I don't live as close to them as I would have liked, because I'll probably be staying more local for my procedure. But they use a carbon-based pigment that they just dilute with water. And that means that pigment can be black and any grayscale down to nothing, right? But that works for everyone. So you've got people with blonde hair, you've got people with red hair, gray hairs, and a mixture of browns and grays and black. And it works. And that part just totally was crazy to me. But the fact is, our follicles, when cut, are actually a lot darker in appearance than the actual hair color that you see when it's grown out. So because of that, they're able to just take grayscale ink, match it down. They also look at not just your hair color, but they look at your skin color to create that natural look. And I think this is such an important thing. Some people, of course, when they go with that shaved head, they still have a lot of good follicles that they will have to continue shaving. But that color will have to match what they're putting in there, or it will look crazy unnatural. And I think still too, people with scars, you're going to have that hair, that comparison. You don't want a contrast. You want that to blend right in. So again, I think this is one of those you get what you pay for things. You want to make sure you got a clinic that knows what they're doing to give you that natural look. Another thing I wanted to touch on real quick is the procedure itself, how long it takes. And an average procedure for SMP takes anywhere between 1 to 3 hours, which might sound like a lot, but for anyone who's watching this, who's actually had a hair transplant, both of mine, they were an all-day event. It was like 7 hours. This is a non-event. When you look at 1 to 3 hours for something that's permanent, and then also add to the fact that there's really no recovery. It's not a surgery, so there's no swelling, there's no wounds, there's no waiting 5-6 months to get results, right? It's instant gratification, if you will. I really love the fact that for those who might not be a really good hair transplant candidate, that they have this option and that it's available to them, and that's awesome. Okay, how long does it last? Is it permanent? The short answer is, unfortunately, no. It is not a completely permanent procedure. A good SMP procedure will give you 5 to 10 years without a touch-up, but just know you will have to at least budget for and expect those minor touch-ups to occur if you want it to continue looking as it was when you had the procedure done. Something to keep in mind, a good clinic should be upfront about that. If there's a clinic who says this is permanent, and they have a cheap price up front, It's probably because they don't want you to be thinking about those touch-ups, and it's an easy way for them to get more money out of you. If you go to a clinic and they're upfront about the fact that you're going to need probably several touch-ups within that first 6-month period, and they cover that cost, it's something you should consider in the whole scope of choosing who you trust and who you want to be a part of that. And lastly, we'll talk about cost. And this is definitely one of those things, you get what you pay for. Do your research. The short answer is an average S.M.P. procedure will cost you between $1,500 and $4,000. If that sounds like a lot, it is for a tattoo, but this ain't a tattoo. And when you look at the cost compared to a hair transplant, that's actually affordable. So I will just say there's a few things to consider, right? When I talked earlier about touch-ups, if they're charging a lot up front, but it includes 6 months or even a year of free touch-ups, that's something that I think really adds up and speaks to their warranty or how they back up their own service. For me, I actually received a personal quote from a local S.M.P. clinic called Good Look Inc. They're here in Bloomington, Minnesota. They quoted me $2,600. And again, that's just from the scar and a couple thin areas. That does sound like the high side because I'm not covering my whole scalp like a lot of people are. But all said and done, I do think that they're going to take care of me. One of the things too to think about is the proximity of their location to where I live. And if this is a place that I'm going to need to have touch-ups in the future, I don't want to be jumping in an airplane flying back and forth to New York. So I'm all about traveling with hair transplants. You know, I went to Turkey, and I definitely encourage anyone to really explore their options there. But with S.M.P., and I was being told a touch-up after the first week, after the first month, a couple more before that 6-month mark. And I mean, that would just be a hassle, I think, to be going back and forth. So it's one of those things I think that really encourages most people to seek out more of a local clinic. So hopefully you live in an area that has a reputable clinic that lives close by or is located quite close by to you. Okay, so last but not least, I'm going to show you my 5-month post-procedure hair progress. And yes, I know I'm in the dungeon right now, so I'm going to get up close and personal so you can see this better. So here's the left side, my temple, and I'll go ahead and fan this out. You can see I've got nothing in my hair in terms of fibers or product. So that's the front hairline, which, by the way, just the shape of that hairline, I'm loving it. It's as good as it was in high school. And then the right temple as well. It's so funny that that right temple is actually thicker than the other hair. So I'm going to have to like blend that. I'm thinking S.M.P. a little bit to kind of darken the skin in that area. So it's not as obvious, but I might even have to start cutting that a little thinner. But again, it's also darker in color. I talked about that in the last episode. It takes a while for the new hairs to kind of blend in with the old hairs. That's just how it goes. So just know that there's a difference in color, and it's even more apparent. It just makes it look thicker and darker than it really is. But really happy with that progress so far. I told my wife, if it didn't actually get any better than right now, I would actually be okay with it. So I'm at 5 months. I'm happy. Everything else is all just bonus points. I'll show you the back. The scar, of course, isn't the thing. Still a little thin up here. And it wasn't the biggest of areas. It was really that front. I'm a tall guy. There's actually not too many people I know that are taller than me. So seeing the top of my hair in the back is only when I'm sitting down. So really, I guess, if I could have it covered, great, but it always takes more hair to move it. And I'm running low on donor in the back now after my second. So I'll be happy with that. I certainly have enough hair in the back to put topical fibers. And if they can hit that with S.M.P. and get the ink down on the scalp, I think it won't show through as much, that light scalp. And I'm usually a very fair skin guy. I'm not as tan like this usually. But anyways, thanks for joining me today. I spoke about my Hawaii trip with my family last week. I am going to be crushing on those videos and putting out an awesome Hawaii dream vacation, as I call it, because my wife and I, we've both agreed that this was probably our best vacation ever. This one will cater to airline employees who are used to flying at a discount or for free, and it'll kind of show you the places you can save money and some of the must-go-to excursions and activities that we did. So anyway, stay tuned for that video. Thanks again, guys, for joining me on today's HT with Dave. I enjoy making these videos. Please consider liking and subscribing to this video. I love reading comments. Also, a quick shout out to my Hair Loss Conquerors Facebook group. You guys are great, and I enjoy sharing this content with you guys and then learning more about your hair loss progress. So anyways, thanks again for joining me. I'll see you next week. Temples are still holding in real well. The hair's still just a little wiry, you know, so if I go to spike it, it doesn't it doesn't point together as well because it's, you know, that new hair is just not as thick. So just a quick pan of everything.